Hello, welcome to Books and Brews,
the place where beer and literature meet.
With your host, certified Cicerone Michael Agnew.
And Laura Mosica, author of the Bluebells Chronicles.
Each month we invite a guest author to read their words and talk about writing while sipping beers specially paired with their work.
Today we welcome Shannon Schroeder.
So sit back,
pop a cold one,
and dive into some books
and brews.
Stopwatch. Okay, 3, 2,
1. We're running, and we're in. Welcome everybody to episode 33 of the Books and Brews podcast. What's that?
I said welcome.
Welcome. welcome. How's your month been, Laura?
Well, I don't know if you ever find this funny. When we were doing this in your house, you knew that I always had to have a list. We were just discussing with Shannon how the days and the weeks just fly by so fast. And so much happens. You'd think I wouldn't need to write this down, but I had a granddaughter this past week.
What?
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So my son and his wife now have 3 children within 3.5 years. And she always has the babies early, so I shouldn't have been surprised. But all of a sudden on December 2nd, I got a text. We have a little girl.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So hopefully I can get down to see her. But, one of my sons is, he's on a base fort in Wisconsin. And so he's got a couple days off. So I have to go pick him up, bring him home. It's just always something going on. But I got to one of my son's wrestling matches. And so that was great. I saw him pin his opponent in 49 seconds flat.
Wow.
So so I'm really glad he's back in. And then, of course, from last month that Chris and I started our new YouTube channel, Wordsmiths and a Wolfhound. And so we had some fun a couple nights ago making medieval mussel and leek stew or soup. Mm-hmm. So that's a recipe from 1390. Yeah, do you like mussels?
I love mussels.
You would love this then. It was really good. And, part of me says, really, how much does cooking change? It's kind of the same basic meats. It's kind of the same basic spices. But the medievals did like saffron. They really loved their saffron. It is kind of cool either way, though, to make a recipe that dates all the way back to 1390 and just see what it's like. I'm wondering if my book, it happens to be right behind the computer. So this is the one I put together. I don't know if you knew that I had done this, and it has a lot of medieval recipes in it. And so this is what we took it from. And just to put in a plug here, as long as we're talking about it, it turns out that 4 and 20 blackbirds baked in a pie, not just a rhyme. They actually did that. And it's amazing. They had a method. By the time I finished this, I was like, medieval people have a really bad rap from modern people. They were so creative with their food. They had fun with their food, like they knew how to make a boar's head breathe smoke. They literally knew how to bake a pie that when the king opened it, blackbirds or whatever birds flew out. They had a way of, this is really funny, they'd put what appeared to be a baked roasted chicken in front of the king. He'd go to dig in and the thing would get up and start running around the table. It's fascinating how they did that. And I'm pretty sure that, I'm not going to give it away. You'd probably get charged with animal cruelty if you did it today.
Probably.
But even like going beyond food, one of the things that Chris and I have been working on like forever, and one day we're going to finish it, is called Theology of Music. And we discovered in the process that in medieval times, they used all 7 modes, whereas today we use major and minor, basically. Mm-hmm. And so you start putting all these together and you go, okay, apart from the horrible brutality, it was an amazing time. I mean, with just incredibly intellectual people, deep thinkers, they had creativity. I feel like they used what they had in a lot of ways more than we do. So it's a really fascinating study doing this cookbook in addition to the music study.
Yeah. Speaking of major and minor chords, so that's what I'm learning on banjo now is major and minor chords.
All right. So
but
you
so
haven't.
we went to Masako and I went to the opera on Saturday.
Cool.
Or the opera, the Met Live in HD
Mm-hmm.
broadcasts, and saw Eurydice. And there was a point when Orpheus gets into the underworld when everything became sad.
Mm-hmm.
And Masako said something about that, and I said, yes, and they were in minor keys. I heard the minor keys.
Yeah, that was something I used to do when I taught general music back in my school teaching days, that I would have the little kids, this is sad, it's minor, this is happy, it's major. We had fun with that.
Read anything? I didn't, so.
Yeah, I have to check my notes again. I'm in the end stages of getting my annual poetry anthology out, so I've been reading poetry. And I've been reading a book called Back to Basics that talks just about things like gardening and things like that, since that's kind of on our list of things to do with the new property we have, is to build a garden, maybe build a greenhouse, start doing things that I've never done in my life. How about you? No, you just didn't read anything.
No, I haven't read anything. Of course not.
Yeah. See, I told you, things just are going by so fast, I almost forgot you'd even answered that.
Yeah. Who's our guest today?
Our guest today is, our guest has two names today. Which one do you want me to use?
You can use both of them. My pen name is not a secret. So
okay, I figured that.
The pen name, and then my real name is everything else. So either way.
Okay, so the real name, this is Shannon Schroeder, who also goes by Sloane Steele. And as Sloane, her Counterfeit Capers series of heist romances are her love letter to the TV show Leverage. You'll have to tell me about that. I'm not actually familiar with that. As Shannon, she writes contemporary romances about big families, both those created by blood and by choice. Her books are set in the city of Chicago because, having grown up there and lived near the city her whole life, she writes what she knows. Shannon is a part-time English teacher, part-time curriculum editor, and full-time mom, even though her kids are pretty self-sufficient teens. In her downtime, she bakes cookies, reads romance, and watches far too much TV. So, funny story, I hate baking. I absolutely hate baking. But I did when my kids were younger, I baked with them, and I would make stories like, we'd put the butter in and that would be, I don't know, the boat or the mountaintop or whatever. And then we'd pour sugar in and I'd go, and then an avalanche came. All my kids love baking. And even the boys, most of the boys like baking too. And I find it so funny, like I hate baking. So I'm thrilled that they do, because then I get cookies and stuff that I would never make for myself.
For me, I cook because I have to. Like, you have to feed people. But baking for me is like the stress reliever. So like when I'm really stressed out, I'll bake cookies. If I'm writing and I'm stuck, plot point, I bake some cookies. It takes me out of it, and everybody's happy then because there's cookies.
Right. That's great. I always wish that I liked cooking and baking more. I kind of do like cooking if I have the time and the ingredients to really have fun, but I never have the time. So, Michael, that means we are all ready for the first beer.
Okay. So our first beer is Greenbelt Premium, old Minnesota's beer. I did a whole chapter in my guidebook to breweries on Greenbelt Premium, truly Minnesota's beer. Fascinating history that I won't go into because it's a long one. Greenbelt Premium is an old Minnesota-based American-style lager. It falls into the discount lager category. It's now brewed at Schell's Brewing down in New Ulm, Minnesota. The reason I picked this to go with the first reading is because of location. Now, sometimes I just get a really good picture of the location that I see the reading happening in. And I always want to put the caveat in, I might be completely wrong. but when I read the reading, because I only read the reading, I haven't read any of the rest of the book. So when I read the reading, I pictured these characters in kind of a seedy apartment full of tech equipment and ashtrays full of roaches, not bug roaches, but marijuana roaches, and probably some empty beer bottles here and there strewn about.
Notice that both Shannon and I are laughing.
Beer, obviously, so I went for a discount lager in a bottle. So therefore, Grain Belt Premium.
And I get why you think that. I actually did go on to Amazon and read the beginning, and that's not quite the way it was.
I figured I could be wrong in this instance, but
the setting is a little bit wrong, but he's got the characters right. Like there are scenes in this book where, you know, you walk into the apartment and there's, you know, empty whiskey bottle and stuff laying around. And the characters, like, especially my hacker, Audrey, she is like her apartment is a total dive. She's like a room from a stripper. So like she's like her apartment is really like that's her. So the fact that you have a discount beer, because she is all about like she's not much of a drinker because she can't afford it. Alcohol is expensive, you know. so you actually got it pretty close in terms of character, not so much setting.
50% right.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it's good that we're actually talking about the setting, because when I read just the outtake, I was really confused at first about who is Jay and who is Nikki and who is Aubrey and who is Mia. I was not at all sure what was going on. So it's great to set the setting. There is a heist being planned, and we'll get more into that. So this is actually a very high-class apartment that has been rented by this very wealthy pair of cousins who are Jay and Mia. And they've hired all these, for lack of a better term, kind of lowlifes, you know, who, as Shannon said, really do fit. Or I'm sorry, in this case, you're Sloane.
Yes, well, that's fine.
For this reading, we're talking to Sloane. Yeah, I'm kind of teasing, but so yeah, it's interesting that she's right. You nailed the characters, because Nikki and Aubrey are really from a very different world than the apartment that they're in. So we are ready for reading number 1. Go ahead.
Okay.
It Takes a Thief.
It Takes a Thief, and this is just the team is just starting to come together. So
we forgot to taste the beer.
Oh,
yeah, sorry. Well,
that's okay. I don't have another glass, so we'll click the can today. I forgot the details. No. And you know what? From the moment I saw Grain Belt in my text, I was like, what have I done to deserve this?
cheap beer for the people who can't afford it.
Yeah.
Right. So, anybody who feels bad they can't afford beer, as far as I'm concerned, you're not missing anything on this one. You found some really good ones that I like. This one, yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead with It Takes a Thief.
Okay, so this is the very beginning when the team is just starting to come together. They're at the apartment that they've rented as a headquarters, and Mia has just insulted Audrey and that she left. So this is Jay, Nikki the thief, and Audrey the hacker together in this space. Jay came back to where Audrey waited. From the corner of her eye, she saw Nikki leaning on the back of the couch, giving this scene far more attention than the TV on the wall. Figuring she was about to lose this gig before it even started, she continued her rant. Look, she started with her hands up. I don't know what game you're playing, flirting with me every time we talk. Maybe you were thinking about slumming it, but it was douchey. His eyes flashed for a second. Conversations go both ways. If you didn't want to talk, you could have shut it down anytime you wanted. Therein lay the problem. She hadn't wanted to shut it down. She enjoyed the banter. She couldn't afford to think about that now. That was before I knew you were involved. I don't know what your girlfriend's problem is unless she found out how you talk to other women, but I'm not going to put up with someone looking down on me and calling me a junkie. What? She's not my girlfriend. She hadn't clocked a ring on the woman's hand, so not wife. And the total look of horror on his face almost made Audrey laugh. Of everything she'd said, that was the one thing he homed in on. Definitely defining boundaries. You sure about that, sport? Nikki asked. The way you two fight, when you see that movie, you know they're hitting the sheets in a few minutes. Audrey could have sworn he turned green. She's my partner. My purely platonic partner. That's all. He took a deep breath and scrubbed a hand over his face. While he didn't say the words, his eyes held an apology for the misunderstanding. Something else simmered there, drawing Audrey out. Too bad she sucked at reading people. I don't know, Nikki continued. I feel a sexual tension in the air. Audrey swallowed. She was feeling it now, too, except it had nothing to do with Ms. Green and everything to do with the man standing in front of her. Then he blinked, breaking whatever spell he'd been weaving. We've been planning this job for a long time. She's worried about being successful. For everything to work, we need a functioning team. Audrey rolled her eyes and Nikki snorted. What? He asked, looking back and forth between Audrey and Nikki. You think your partner views us as a team? Audrey asked. She will. Why don't you set up the equipment the way you want and we'll start fresh tomorrow? So, not fired. Audrey looked over to where the boxes of equipment stood. She wanted to play with everything. Was it worth putting up with someone who assumed she was an addict? Walking to the massive L-shaped desk, she tossed her hat on a chair, letting her hair fall to her shoulders. Fine, but if she insults me again, I'm out. Nikki laughed. Good luck with that. I don't think she knows how to talk to people without insulting them. She's not that bad, he said. He stood next to Audrey, offering her a soft smile. When he looked into her eyes like he was right now, she imagined the guy she'd flirted with for months. This was the man who treated her like she was important, not the help. Then she got a whiff of his cologne. Even that smelled expensive, like they could charge for sniffs. She glanced at him standing there in his suit, shirt sleeves rolled at the elbow, and then glanced down at the stained shirt she'd worn for a shift at the grind. So she wasn't glamorous. She also didn't look like a junkie. Miss Green had probably never seen an addict up close and personal. They came from different worlds. Audrey was used to it. At least she was when she expected it. Being around Jay was definitely throwing her off her game. Just keep her away from me and we'll be fine. Take everything for a spin and let me know if you need anything. He motioned for her to sit in a leather chair he wheeled over. She sank down. Wow. Felt good, like a cushion to cradle all her curves. Much better than her lumpy mattress or the creaky old chair in her room. He pushed the chair toward the desk. Near her ear, he said, I'm glad you took the job. I'm sorry I missed our initial meeting. The quiet tone sent a shiver down her spine. She glanced over to the couch. Nikki's attention had returned to the action movie she'd been watching. See you tomorrow, he said, and headed to the door. What about my phones? The box isn't locked. You can take them back. He winked and slipped out. What the hell is going on? She asked aloud. Nikki threw an elbow over the back of the couch. They're weird. She's paranoid, afraid we're going to record her and out her to the criminal underworld or some shit. She jumped up. I'm going to order a pizza. You want some? I don't have any cash on me right now. Or ever. It's on Jay. In that case, I'd love some. As Nikki got on the phone to order, Audrey finished unboxing the equipment. By the time the pizza arrived, she had the computer hooked up and running. She even mirrored the monitor to the big TV on the wall. How did you get internet access? Nikki asked. I tapped the neighbors. Oh, I think I'm going to like you. Can you get me premium channels? With a smile, Audrey said, maybe. Thank God, I've rented every disc in the damn box to play on my game console. I need some variety. The Greens are strongly opposed to me having too much running through this place that would tie us together. Can't log on to my accounts and they don't want me opening new ones. Shit, I have an easy workaround for that. I'll get you access that will hide who you are. I think this is going to be the start of a beautiful friendship.
I really enjoyed this, especially when I read from the very beginning of the sample on Amazon. These thieves are not your standard thieves. And I kind of like that because it's a lot easier to root for them because of the reason they're planning this huge art heist. And how did you come across, or what put this idea into your head of the whole backstory of why they're planning this heist?
Well, like it says in my bio, this series is truly my love letter to the TV show Leverage, which aired from like 2008 to 2012, something like that. It was one of those shows that my kids were really small at the time, but that was one show that I watched live. I loved it. And like the tagline for that show is sometimes bad guys make the best good guys. So it's kind of like 18 for a new generation, right? Like they're doing bad things for good reasons. And I always loved that show. And so years ago, I had the idea, what if it was like Leverage, but they were all women? And it was one of those things I put on the back burner because I knew I didn't have the skill to write it because I'm a pantser. Like I don't plot and outline a story. And you can't really do that when you're dealing with like creating heist, right? You have to like know where you're going. So it was like a back burner thing. And so then it wasn't until a few years ago, I finished my deadlines for my editors. All my books were turned in. I had nothing due to anyone. And I was like, ooh, I think I want to play with the thieves now. And I kind of trotted that out. And in thinking of, you know, what it was, like I had the premise that I knew that I had this group of thieves that were going to come together, and they were going to be doing these heists. But yeah, I had to figure out the why. Like, why are they doing this? And obviously somebody had to pay for it. So I gave the people with money, the backers, right? That's our mastermind. But it needed to be personal. So I started thinking, okay, what would make it personal? And if it was, what wrongs are they trying to right? So yeah, Mia's and Jared's fathers ran like a huge Ponzi scheme and stole money from millions of people. And when the indictments came in, they fled the country. So they're not paying for their crimes. And so Mia and Jared have plotted to basically take it on their father's friends because they benefited from this scheme and nothing's happening to them. So yeah, so they're stealing from all these rich dudes and selling the artwork and giving the money to victims of their fathers anonymously because, you know, their name is tainted. And so it's a complicated family mess, you know? So yeah, it was really about how do I make this plausible for my characters? Like, why would they want to do this? They're not criminals. They're trying to clean up their family name because their fathers are criminals. So what makes it worthwhile doing it? And then it was just,
right. And I thought you laid a great background on that. I just want to cover quickly before we go on to beer number 2. You have how many books out? About 40?
Oh, you know what? People always count, and I have to really count about it. 6, 10, 13, 14, 15, 18, about 25-ish.
Got to be a lot more than that. I thought I went through and counted up on Amazon, and I thought I lost count somewhere in there, but I thought it was well over 30. And it's across 4 or 5 series. And when did you publish your first book?
My first book was published with Kensington in January of 2013. And that was my first series, The Leary.
You've done all of this. You've written like probably more than 30 books in about 7-8 years.
Yes and no. Like the first few books I had before I got my contract. So I was like a little bit ahead of the game. Yeah, it wasn't until my 4th book that I was actually writing under deadline. You know, I was a little bit ahead, but yeah. So over the course of the last, 8 or 9 years, I've written them all. Some are shorter, like 6 of them are novellas, so they're shorter.
Yeah. Still pretty amazing. So Michael, beer number 2.
Beer number 2 is one that I don't actually have before me because they don't make it anymore.
Okay.
I thought they did. I thought you could still get it, but apparently it's discontinued. It is from Lagunitas Brewing in California, and it is called Undercover Shutdown. Undercover Investigation Shutdown. That's what it's called. It's just the name of the beer seemed appropriate for this next reading. The name of the beer comes from the fact that long ago, before weed was legal in California, the brewery was investigated undercover and found to have marijuana in the brewery and was shut down for a period of time.
Was this during Prohibition or just in general?
No, this was the 90s probably.
Oh, okay. Okay. Were they like dealing marijuana or were they putting it in the beer, or why did they have marijuana there?
Well, they're in wine country. And it is a not well-kept industry secret of both wine and beer that winemakers and brewers smoke a lot of weed.
Really?
Yes.
Well, it was a secret from me.
So
now it's not.
That's why they had it in the brewery, because they're brewers. Smoke a lot of weed.
Sort of a side note, but Chris and my son gave us like an online class on wine as our Christmas gift last year. And one of the things we learned in that class was the impact that prohibition has had on winemaking in this country for decades. It was really fascinating that you would have thought, well, I mean, okay, I would have, maybe someone who knows winemaking wouldn't, but I would have thought that, okay, well, you just start making it again. But it's really a fascinating story. However, we don't have time to go into that. We're ready to, which is from Catch Your Breath, the Leary family series, book number 4.
And I chose this one because although you're not supposed to have favorites, this is by far my favorite book. Like, the favorite one that I ever wrote. I just had so much fun with the characters. Jimmy is my all-time favorite hero because he's such a jerk sometimes, but he's a good guy. And so just to set you up, Jimmy is best friends with Moira's older brother. So it's a best friend's sister or brother's best friend kind of romance. He's a cop, she's a reporter. So needless to say, they don't really mix. And so the one piece that you don't have in this reading is that they were both in attendance at a fancy party, and she thought she saw him, and then he disappeared because he saw that she was there. And now he's approaching her now because, it's supposed to be a secret.
In her
okay.
apartment.
Yes, at her apartment.
Her apartment, yeah.
Jimmy heard the smirk. She knew. He rolled a shoulder off the wall and pressed his palm against the door, widening the opening to reveal himself. Moira let out a little yip and jumped. I knew it. I only saw you for a second, but I knew. Why the hell did you run out? What's up with the phony name? Oh, you're undercover, right? I bet it's something good. Tell me. Moira. The single word came out sharper than he meant, but it worked. Moira's jaw snapped shut. Gabby, who's his partner, continued. Miss O'Leary, did you mention to anyone that you saw Detective O'Malley at the party last night? No, I thought it was Jimmy, but by the time I made my way through the crowd, he was gone, and Decker said he was James Buchanan. I thought I imagined seeing you. Although Moira spoke directly to him, Gabby interrupted her. Miss O'Leary. When she had Moira's attention, she went on. Detective O'Malley is undercover, and it's imperative that no one know his real name. Moira slid her gaze back to Jimmy, and being the oldest of 5, he knew what was coming. What's in it for me? The thanks of the Chicago Police Department, he answered. She snorted. That's not going to pay my rent. I want an exclusive. I'll keep my mouth shut and you give me the details before anyone else. How about you keep your mouth shut or I'll haul you in on obstruction charges. Gabby touched his forearm, but he refused to back down. No way was Moira going to get the better of him. He'd never bowed down to any reporter and he wouldn't start now. Moira stood staring at him with her arms crossed defiantly below her full breast, daring him to threaten her again. The problem was legal threats weren't crossing his mind just then. Luckily, cooler heads prevailed and Gabby stepped between them. Miss O'Leary, we can't promise you get a story first, mostly because there might not be much of a story when we're done with our investigation, but we'll do our best. She pulled a card from her pocket and handed it to Moira. She accepted it and smiled up at Jimmy, who glared at her over Gabby's head. What, Jimmy, no card from you? However will I contact you? She snapped her fingers. Oh yeah, I can probably knock on your dad's door. He stiffened at the implication that he couldn't support himself, mostly because Moira knew the truth. He'd moved back home to take care of his dad. Shit, she'd been there to help him move in. Gabby stepped back and he either had to move or knock her over. Thank you for your cooperation, Miss O'Leary, Gabby said. Moira moved back inside her apartment and wagged her fingers at him before closing the door. Her smile returned to the sweet one that he found so hard to resist. He listened, but she didn't lock the door. Gabby turned and started down the stairs. She looked over her shoulder. You coming? In a minute. When Gabby hit the landing and turned the corner, he grabbed the doorknob and turned. Sure as shit, it turned without any resistance whatsoever. What the hell was that girl thinking? He opened the door and strode in. She had the radio on and he knew she couldn't hear him. He leaned against the wall in the hallway in the epicenter of the apartment and waited. She wouldn't be able to go anywhere without seeing him. Within a minute, she emerged from her bedroom wearing a skimpy robe while reading the label on a jar. Although he hadn't moved, it was like she felt his presence and looked up. Everything froze. Her eyes widened. Then she screamed, threw the jar at him. The bottle bounced off his chest and he grabbed it from the floor. Wax. Jimmy let out a chuckle. Moira's heart lodged in her throat before recognition hit. Jimmy, what the hell? Air flooded into her lungs and her heart steadied, but her blood boiled. What the hell are you doing in my apartment? You didn't lock your door. I certainly didn't leave it open either. There was no invitation to enter. Her voice rose steadily and she jabbed a finger in his direction. You had no business coming in. I should call and have you arrested. He raised a hand in defense. When you closed the door, I listened for you to lock up and you didn't. I turned the knob and let myself in. You scared the shit out of me. What the hell is wrong with you? Me scaring you is the least of your worries. What if I was a rapist or a murderer? You're making yourself an easy target. This building has zero security. It is like an invitation for some creep to come after you. His voice stayed quiet and strong and was somehow way more menacing than her screaming rant. She took a step back and crossed her arms again. She suddenly realized she wore nothing but her bathrobe, which was currently gaping. Tugging it closed and pulling the sash tighter, she stared at her feet. Could she get more embarrassed? Jimmy's hand holding a jar filled her field of vision. Her wax. I think you dropped this. Yes, her night just got more embarrassing. She curled her fingers around the jar and tucked it in the pocket of her robe. His feet nearly touched hers, and she focused on his scuffed dress shoes in front of her bare toes. They stood in silence, and Moira noticed that they breathed in rhythm. He stood close enough that the heat from his body permeated the thin material of her robe. Holy shit, Jimmy O'Malley never got this close to her. If she leaned forward, she could rest her face on his chest. She couldn't look at him. It was bad enough that he scared her half to death, but now he'd seen her freak out while half naked, all while he was holding her leg wax. And she might actually die if he realized she was just fantasizing about him. Hey, he said softly, nothing else. He waited silently until her eyes met his. She expected to see his usual ridicule, but instead there was something else. Kindness? I didn't mean to scare you. He paused. Well, I did, but only because I want you to understand how completely unsafe you are. I wouldn't want something to happen to you. Her heart, which had been making its way back to its normal position, plummeted to her feet. Jimmy stood close, mere inches separating them. How many times over the years had she dreamed of being in this exact position? And he was here because he cared. She leaned forward and was certain she'd seen the look on his face shift. His eyes darkened, and she knew he wanted to kiss her. The knowledge sent shivers through her body. He suddenly stepped back, turned, and walked toward the door. Opening it, he said over his shoulder, make sure you lock up.
So this is from the O'Leary family series, and I believe that series has 6 books in it.
Yes, it has 6 books. This is the 4th one. The first one's always free if you read digitally. And it's a series that the family has 6 siblings, and so each book is a different sibling, figuring out life, falling in love.
So you took the words right out of my mouth, because my first question was, what do you define as a big family? Because this series is sort of advertised as you like writing about big families. So my first question then, now that we know there are 6 siblings, what drew you to wanting to write about big families? And what do you think, I was thinking about this, there are a lot of books and a lot of novels people love to read about big families, even though most people don't want a big family themselves these days. What drew you to it, and what do you think is the attraction in general that people want to read about big families?
I think there's a couple of different reasons. For me, this neighborhood where the O'Malleys and the O'Learys live, because the O'Malleys live like right across the street. That's where the whole best friend thing comes in. It's based off of the Northwest Side neighborhood of Chicago where I grew up. And I knew families that had 5 and 6 kids growing up. And I always thought it was cool. I did not have a big family, mostly because my father died when I was little. So I grew up with an older brother and a younger brother. And then my mom got remarried years later. And so I have a half brother. Which isn't really it's not a tiny family. It's not like I was an only child, but compared to these other families that I knew, it was small. It wasn't like 6 or 7 kids. And there was just something about kind of like that chaos of a big family that is fascinating and fun and might make you a little nuts, but that at the core, it's solid. And I think for a lot of people, that's what it is. It's like you're drawn to that kind of that loyalty that someone's always got your back. It doesn't matter how much you may hate them in the moment. They're always there for you because you're family. So I think that's part of what the draw is for people to like to read about that. And then in the romance genre, I think the other draw is that it's so easy then to build a series, is that you get to follow this family and you're in this world for an extended period of time. It's a fun place to be. It's like coming home again every time you open up a new book, because it's like it's familiar. You know these people. Yes, you get some new characters and you get a new love interest and things like that, but you know the family. And so it's a fun place to go back and revisit.
I had to kind of laugh as you were talking about knowing these families, because as Michael well knows, I have 9 children.
So was there any chaos in your family?
Never. They all just sat around knitting, and baking cookies. Yeah, actually, here's a funny story. My dad, should be careful what I say here. My dad one day, this was years ago, was like, it's so loud at your house, and it's we escape as soon as we can. I'm like, well, of course it's loud. You've got 25 people crowded in the kitchen for a birthday party, and they're singing happy birthday. Of course it's loud. And he said, referring to my mother, who had 6 brothers, he said, the Schomer boys were never like that. And who knows why, to this day, I don't know why, but the one time my uncle ever stopped by, happened to show up the very next day, knocked on my door, started telling me tales about the Schomer boys. He's like, yeah, we were all smoking by the time we were in 3rd grade. Once, my brother and your dad's brother got thrown in juvie because they stole, what did they steal? A lawnmower engine because they were going to make a motorized bicycle. And this is like in the 50s. And I was just thinking, I know my uncles. They are not shy and quiet. I don't believe for a second that they spend Christmas sitting in the corner knitting. Discussing theology. Like, I know. So I have 7 boys and 2 girls. So we have a lot of testosterone. We have a lot of energy. And but I was thinking about one of my sons, the one who just had his 3rd child born. One of his girlfriends was an only child, and she was totally scared off by us. The first time he brought her home, I asked later, he's like, I think she was a little overwhelmed and we didn't see her again. And so I want to tell this story when I found out that his college girlfriend, who is now his wife, was going to be coming home. I was teaching all day that Saturday, and I was like, oh no, we're going to scare off another one, because it's just her and her big sister. And they're like, 20 months apart, and they're really close. And I was just like, oh no, we're going to scare off another one. And so I came home after teaching all day. I opened the front door, and there is my future now daughter-in-law. She's on the stairs with the Nerf gun like this, going pow, 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 shooting at my little boys and racing all over the house. And they were just having a great time. And I was like, whew, I don't know why she's comfortable with 7 boys, but she fits right in, and it's just funny that some people really are just overwhelmed by it, and other people love the energy. And there's definitely energy, and it could be chaos. But I did want to ask you, how in the world do you write so fast? You said a couple of novellas, but that's still a huge output in a relatively short time.
Really, it's schedule, routine. I started writing so when the first Leary book came out, More Than This, in 2012, I had that book done. I had the second book drafted. It needed a whole lot of fixing, but it was mostly done. My kids were still small, like elementary school age. And so, when you've got little kids, a lot of time is spent, chauffeuring them to various things. So for me, it was really about the discipline of, it's football practice. Drop them off football practice, write for an hour and a half, or cheerleading, or ballet, or swim, or whatever. Like, you go into class, I'm sitting down writing. So all of my writing happened in 1 to 2 hour chunks of time in the evenings while they were little in whatever practice. Early on, it was I was writing by hand, and then after they went to bed at night, then I was putting it in my computer because I didn't have a laptop. Then I got a cheap laptop, so I would which made, of course, life a whole lot easier to be able to just type it all in. So really, it was about having that discipline. It's I just trained myself that, this is it's the only time I really ever had to write. And for me, before I start writing a book, I create a playlist. I do a lot of character work since I'm not a plotter and I don't really outline. So I don't I might know a few key scenes, but I have no idea how I'm getting from point A to point B. But a playlist helps. So I listen to a playlist. I make it weeks before I start writing the book. I listen to it like nonstop, drive my kids crazy. They're like, oh my gosh, the song again. Until it becomes background and I'm not singing along with it. It's just there. And so every time I put that playlist on, I'm back in that world. So all the noise gets blocked out and I can just sit down and I just write.
That was really cool. I've never heard that before. Not to that extent. I've heard of people having background music. Michael, we need to move on to beer number 3.
Beer number 3. Okay, so this is another name pairing. This is from Flying Dog Brewery in Maryland. It is an Imperial Pilsner, which is a style that I usually really don't care for. I love Pilsner. It's my favorite beer style, but why ruin it by making it big and high alcohol? But this one's pretty good. I hadn't had it until just now, but I like it. So the reason I chose it for the pairing is because it's called Family Drama.
that can feel like sum up all my books.
And that's really all there is to this pairing.
So would I love this or hate it? Because I wasn't able to it.
You might like it. It's got a good, rich, like bread dough kind of maltiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's only moderately bitter. And there's this really nice, spicy, lemony, hop overtone flavor it's really good. I'm actually
Well, you make it sound good. It sounds very interesting.
It's not as bitter as a normal Pilsner because it's 8% as opposed to 4%.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to what, 12%?
4%. So a normal
4%.
Pilsner would be 4 to 5%.
Okay.
Alcohol range. This one's 8.5%.
Okay. So I'm thinking again about the college student. I never forget that story. And it's like I was there. I can see the look on his face from the way you described it. That was funny. I wasn't even there and it was funny. Okay, so reading number 3. This is from my Forever Plus One from the Daring Divorcees series, if I said that right.
Yes, you did.
All right.
This is a series of the characters are all older. They're all over 40. They've all been divorced, ready to kind of get back into dating and finding love again. This is the 3rd book in the series, and Evelyn and Owen are both members of this group that met in a divorce support group. They've been best friends for years, and now they've decided that they're going to be a couple. So they're in a relationship, and they're going to his brother's wedding, which is a destination wedding. And it's the first time they're going to be with his family as a real couple. Evelyn had been around Owen's family plenty over the years. Birthday parties, backyard barbecues, weddings. She'd been his date often, probably a little too often given the previous status of the relationship. Everyone had always considered them a couple, and they'd just shaken their heads. After years of convincing everyone they were just friends, they were now a couple. She didn't want to explain to people the how, when, and why of it. Would they ask, or would they just see them and accept it? Owen's hand slipped into hers as they walked to the rental car. You're overthinking this. My family already loves you. That's when I was your friend. You're still my best friend. That hasn't changed. Even though her heart swelled at his acknowledgement, she said, you keep telling yourself that. Your mom is going to want to interrogate me. That's what families like yours do. He opened the passenger door for her and put their bags in the trunk. Then he got behind the wheel. What do you mean, families like mine? You're like a TV sitcom family. You're all friends and you like one another. If you had a sister, I bet anything that your dad would want to sit down with her, date, and vet him. So it doesn't matter if they've known me for years. Things are different, and they're going to treat me differently. In truth, she had no idea what to expect. Growing up, it had been her and her mother. She pretty much had done whatever she wanted. She'd been on her own. We'll see. He interlocked her fingers with his, raised their hands and kissed hers. Try not to panic. You can hold your own with anyone from my family. He drove them to the hotel, and Evelyn gave herself a silent pep talk. He was right. She'd known his family for a long time. They'd always treated her like one of them. Maybe this wouldn't be too bad. She liked the concept of belonging. When they got to a hotel, Owen grabbed their bags and she went to check them in. He followed and asked, do you want to hide out in the room or go find my family? Evelyn signed for the room and looked down at herself. He sighed. You look fine. You always say that, but it doesn't make it true. She accepted the cards from the clerk. Would you hate me if I said I'd rather wait till tomorrow? I could never hate you. The look in his eyes made her believe every syllable. You can go hang out with your brother or whatever. You don't need to babysit me. Crawling into bed with you and relaxing sounds like a great way to spend the rest of my night. He led the way to the elevators, hefting both their bags. When the elevator arrived, the door swished open and Owen's mom stepped out. Her face brightened and she spread her arms wide. You're here. She rushed forward and threw her arms around him. Because his hands were occupied with luggage, it was a one-sided hug. Other people pushed around them and got on the elevator. The door swished shut, taking Evelyn's escape with them. After releasing Owen, Carol turned to Evelyn. She wrapped her in the same kind of hug she'd given her son. I'm so glad you came. Evelyn returned the embrace. When Carol stepped back, she pointed between Evelyn and Owen. So this is real, right? David wasn't pulling my leg? Owen sighed and rolled his eyes. No joke, Evelyn and I are a couple. The woman clapped like a giddy cheerleader. It's about time. She grabbed Evelyn's hand. I've been telling Owen for years that you were perfect for him. He's so slow to move, you know? Always has to make sure he's looked at everything from every angle before committing. Evelyn sneaked a look at Owen from the corner of her eye. I'm glad all my angles are approved. Looping her arm through Evelyn's, Carol said, go put your bags in your room and meet us in the bar. Everyone is there. Evelyn wasn't ready to face the whole family, but now she was feeling cornered. Actually, Mom, we were headed upstairs for the night. I was on duty yesterday, and Evelyn has a lot going on at work. We're going to turn in. Bah, she said, waving a hand. You're half my age, and I'm still up. Evelyn patted her hand. I appreciate the offer, but I'm really beat. She looked to Owen for help. She didn't know what else to say to convince Carol to let her go. Suddenly, her arm was free. With a chuckle, Carol said, I get it now. Tired, sure. You could have just said you were going to your room to boink. Boink? Evelyn swallowed a giggle. Owen rolled his eyes again. Thanks, Mom. She went on tiptoe and kissed Owen's cheek. I'm old, not dead. Have a good night. As Carol walked toward the bar, Owen jabbed at the elevator button. He stood stock still, and Evelyn made it about a minute before she lost it and fell into a fit of laughter. Not funny. Sure it is. Who the hell uses the word boink? Apparently, my mother. The doors opened and they stepped in, Evelyn still laughing. And I was worried about being scrutinized. Had I known that having sex with you would lead to your mother making you uncomfortable, I would have done it a long time ago. Watch it. The bar isn't open all night. I can invite them all back to our room. The thought sobered her quickly, but she liked the sound of our room. Maybe this wouldn't be as stressful, she thought. As soon as they made it upstairs, his phone lit up with text. His brother wanted him to come down for a drink. He declined, even though Evelyn told him to go. She tried to convince him to enjoy time with his family. I'm really just going to shower and get in bed. I want to do some more research while I have the downtime. You think I'm going to have a beer with Dave instead of taking a shower with you? You don't know me at all. I didn't invite you into my shower. You owe me. Owe you for what? She asked, pulling her shirt over her head and walking backward to the bathroom. His eyes widened and he continued to stalk toward her. For getting you off the hook with my mom. I suffered humiliation for you. I don't know if that's enough to share my hot water. Down went her pants. She kicked them to the side. The cold tile of the floor battled the heat of her skin caused by his stare. I can definitely make it worth your while. Lust fluttered low in her belly. Then he did the one-handed t-shirt yank that only guys did. Does he know how sexy that is? Or is he simply being efficient? Her mouth watered at the movement, watching his abs bunch and flatten. Hey, babe, my eyes are up here. He moved his fingers from his chest to his face.
Aha. I'm sorry I got involved in looking at my notes here. One of the things I found interesting about this was I don't read romance a lot, but from, years ago, from the ones I have read, there's very often this formula. There is the cute meet, and then there is the conflict because they don't really know each other, so there are misunderstandings. And yet you've gone the route of two people who've known each other for a long time, so you don't have the cute meet. Presumably, they're not going to have these stupid misunderstandings because they know each other quite well. So where do you go from there? How do you create the tension and the conflict?
I think especially with characters like this who are older, we all have baggage. I mean, at 40, way more than when you're at 20, right? And so while they work really well as good friends and they rely on each other for everything, as friends, you don't really necessarily have to deal with that baggage. Like you kind of just accept that person as baggage. But then if you're talking about mingling your lives, now you do. So, like Evelyn has an ex-husband she's still on friendly terms with. They work in the same field. So they both work in TV. And Owen doesn't like the guy. And when he starts popping up, that like he doesn't think like she's cheating, or that he doesn't like the way the man treats Evelyn, and that causes conflict for them, because she's like, let me handle things myself. Like, I'm a grown woman, I can do, I can handle my life. And so the baggage that they bring to the relationship is really kind of where that conflict comes from, because you have to like learn to navigate that as adults.
Right. So would it be fair to say, do you feel that these stories, these romances, are maybe a little more realistic than some of the typical romances? With life problems that are very normal?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that depending on the genre is so broad. Like you can find the total escapist, like the old school, like bodice rippers, where it's like over the top, this guy's going to sweep you off your feet and, have you live in a castle kind of, they still exist. And that's a great, escapist, romance. But I think there's a lot more kind of like grounded in the reality of life, where, there's some things that, you ignore. You're like, nobody ever talks about morning breath, right? Because it's a romance.
Right.
But that reality of the everyday stuff that we have to deal with, that makes that journey of falling in love a little bit more realistic. It's more attainable, like it's attainable for anyone. And that's kind of what I think as romance authors we do, is like we show people like that hope, like it's there.
And that, probably speaks to a question I would have if we had like 2 hours to conduct this interview. So I want to ask just really quickly, because we're running out of time. There are different feelings about what name to use for a different series. So some authors will just keep the same author name across all their different series, and other authors like you will pick a different name for a different sort of genre of writing. Why did you choose on that side to pick a different name for a different series?
It was actually my publisher's request.
Okay.
They said, hey, we'd like that we can launch you as a debut author if you have a different name.
Okay.
And they are marketing it as romantic suspense, even though it's still very light. It's not like dark, or it's Counterfeit Capers. Like it's very capery. Yeah. It's lighthearted fun. So I was like, I never wanted to have a pen name, because the idea of being two people is not something I could ever do. I'm too lazy for that. So I said, hey, I will do the pen name, but it's got to be open. Like I can't do it as a secret. I won't pretend to do two people. So it's very out in the open. So I do have like a separate newsletter list, just for the people who come to me from those books. But everybody knows, like both names are all over the place, so it's not a secret. But it was really my publisher's choice to kind of like, because they're marketing them a little bit differently, but it's still very much my voice and my style. Okay.
I have to say, I really enjoyed the opening pages of, I looked at the sample on, I think, the first two of the Thieves series. And so, I try not to buy the books of authors we interview, because I'd go totally broke. But I'll probably have to make an exception here. I really, I found the opening of both of those books very fun, and the characters very enjoyable. And I think in part, I like them because they're not like all good. They're not all bad. They're very realistic in the sense that they're just flawed people kind of trying to get by in the world, and trying to, they've got their good points, they've got their not so great points, and we'll see what happens.
That's what I was going for.
Yep. Well, you got it. So I think that we are out of time. And so
I just want to say, for this reading, I had to go online and look up videos of the one-handed t-shirt yank. It's actually
I missed that because what
one-handed t-shirt yank.
What did the t-shirt have?
How to remove a t-shirt with one hand.
Over your head.
Yeah, so
only guys do it.
Was most clear to me. He had his arm raised in the air and did kind of
well, that would work too. That would work too.
I'm I had to wonder the same thing. When I read that, I was like, have I ever seen a guy remove a t-shirt with one hand? I don't
I've never done it.
that.
So.
Well, now the pressure's on. Now I'm just going to spend days trying to master this trick, figure out why women never do it. They like end up breaking an arm or something. And next month I'll be like, Michael, I know why women don't do this. I'm in traction. So, my musical clocks went off. We've got, I don't know, probably at least half a dozen clocks that all make different sounds, and they're all just a few minutes off. So you might start to hear them all going off all around the house in the next minute. So Shannon, where can our, I think we're up to 6.8 million listeners find you?
My website, www.shannonschroeder.com, that has both pen names on it, because again, not a secret. I'm on Twitter at @sschroeder_, or on Instagram at Sloane Steele author.
You should probably spell Shannon for our Chris, because it's not standard spelling.
Yes, my mother had to be difficult. SHANNYNSCHROEDER.
Again, I have to kind of laugh because my kid's father is from Ireland. And so my oldest daughter is named Kiva. And I love the sound of the name. And I didn't know what the Irish spelling was. And so my then husband said, well, you can pick the name, but I want the traditional Irish spelling because to him it's normal. And so it's pronounced Kiva. It is spelled Caoimhe. And if our listeners want, look up, I think it's something like Irish Names in a Coffee Shop, something like that. There's an absolutely hilarious skit on YouTube about the spelling and phonetics of Irish names. So your mother wasn't nearly as difficult as as apparently I was. But it's been a great icebreaker for her. So I think she loves the unusual spelling of her name. Michael, what are our links and your links?
Our links are, I almost gave my links again. Our links are booksandbrews.net, Book and Brews on Instagram, Books and Brews with Laura Vosica and Michael Agnew on Facebook. My links are aperfectpint.net and aperfectpint. Laura, where are you?
I am at Laura Vosica, V as in Victor, OSIKA .com. You can also get to the same site with bluebellschronicles.com. I have a Twitter account under Gabriel's Horn. I don't really know what the actual handle is. It's like GBRLSHN or something like and I'm not on it that much anyway. And I'm on Facebook, laura.vosica.author, and I don't even know where else I am because I don't use half of it anymore. Any upcoming events, Shannon?
No, I don't think so. It Takes a Thief is being launched in paperback, so it will be available in paperback right now. And no, I don't have any other events coming up anytime soon. But I am working on some new books.
Oh, fantastic. Any for you, Michael?
No.
I should just quit asking. And I have upcoming events either, but my anthology is coming out hopefully before Christmas, and that is Startled by Love. Just dumb luck that's the theme I picked for the year, that myself and two of my kids happen to get married. So, and the last question of the evening is...
Who is our guest next time?
I thought you'd never ask. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this right. Siddhira Stone. The award-winning contemporary romance author Siddhira Stone spins steamy, smoochy tales set in small businesses, a quirky bookstore, a neighborhood bar, a vintage boutique. Her stories highlight found family, friendship, and the sizzling chemistry that pulls unlikely partners together. When she emerged from her writing cave in Las Vegas, Nevada, which she seldom does, she can be found in belly dance class or strumming her ukulele, perhaps exploring the West with her charming husband or cooking up a storm, and always gobbling all the romance books. Siddhira's Promise to Readers, a guaranteed HEA and no cliffhangers. I had to look up HEA, and it has many meanings, but I think we mean happily ever after. Her books are actually, I believe I read that they're set in Tacoma, which is kind of, hi puppy, kind of the area that I used to live in. And so the dog is coming to say hello. And so I'm kind of interested to read some of her excerpts and see if I recognize any of these places.
Mm-hmm. Well, we look forward to that. I want to thank you, Shannon, for coming and reading for us and joining us here for conversation. I want to thank all of you out there for tuning in. Please tell your friends. This has been Books and Brews, episode 33. Thanks for joining. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Cheers.